Hey everybody, this is James from TeaDB.org bringing you another Drinking Inbetweenisode. So today I am bringing a tea on from teas we like. So they're a good source for tea. They don't offer a lot of samples, but they have a lot of good semi-aged tea, a lot of it which comes from Taiwan. Same case with this tea. So this tea I am drinking is the Naked Yiwu from them, and this is kind of, I guess, a white label, and unfortunately it's no longer available. I just looked at their site. They've stocked it a couple times, and I think it sold out pretty quickly both times. I own a couple cakes of this, and it was, and those of you that are familiar with the Yunnan history might know a bit more about this, but when sort of the Pu'erh production was starting up in the newer school of Pu'erh production was starting up in sort of the mid-90s. There was a group of Taiwanese people that went to Yiwu, and they made, in conjunction with the locals, a production called the Zhenchen Yahao. It's a very famous tea, costs probably 5 figures USD at this point now. So this tea is not that, but it's a tea also sourced from Yiwu that's been used to fake it, and that's sort of the origin story of this tea. Another interesting aspect to this tea is that it's been stored quite dry. It's been stored in Taiwan, but it's been seal stored, and as you can sort of see from the liqueur, this is steep number 4, I'm using pretty much my normal parameters here, is that it's pretty dry, and I think that is reflected in the taste as well. So I have steep number 3 and 4. Let's get going. So the aroma, very floral actually. There's definitely a really pungent element to this that's almost a little smoky. I think in the initial couple infusions there was a little bit more smoke to this. So those of you that are used to like Yiwu as a very approachable, very floral, even when you have it young, tea, this is actually pretty different, and I think it tastes very old school and sort of old-fashioned in its processing. The tea scene has changed a lot in the last 20 years, and I think it shows in a number of ways, one of those which is processing. So I've not had a lot of old school Yiwus that are processed similar to this, so this is quite interesting. It's got a pretty thick, almost a little powdery texture to it. It's not particularly sweet. It doesn't have that big, really friendly bouquet to it. There's definitely a little bit of astringency to it, even a little bit of sourness as well. A lot of resin, so you could tell that this tea just has a lot of stuff in it. Probably not processed to be something that you would drink right away. These days, people make an Yiwu tea, and it's probably safe to assume that some people will consume that tea pretty fast. So I think there's an incentive made to sort of make those teas ready for consumption quite quickly. This tea, I don't think that's been the case. In fact, I think this tea would probably do even better with longer aging. So quite interesting, considering it may be right around 20 years old already. It brews a lighter color even than the Shaguan Love Forever, and the I think probably even lighter than the Zhongcha Huangyin. And if I were to have those teas blind, I would probably guess that they were older than this tea, even though the material for this is supposedly older than both of them. So really kind of in that barnyardy hay element sort of thing going on. Cheers. Just really interesting. There's something to this tea that's just somewhat familiar, but also really quite unique and unfamiliar to me. And I think, I don't know, it's just very old school. So for me, this tea, I don't think it's the best Yiwu I've had, but it might be one of the most interesting Yiwu sessions I've had in the past couple of years is my sessions with this tea. And if you need proof that the current processing for Yiwu and stuff like that is just totally different, I think this tea is a great tea to try. I think it's just so different than those teas. And you know, people wonder about how these modern Yiwus will age and sort of their trajectory. And I tend to think they'll probably do okay, depending on the production. But it's so much easier to see how something like this would age. It's just so much stuff in it. There's smoke, there's resin, there's a lot of pungency to it, there's body, there's astringency. You could see how mellowing it out would help it. And this tea has been exposed to drier aging, which is maybe not my favorite to create something drinkable in sort of like the 15 or 20 years, but what it does do is it really maintains the characteristics of it. So it really does give you sort of a glimpse as to how this would be, whereas if you did kind of the opposite of this on the polar end of the spectrum, if you Hong Kong stored this tea, I think it'd be a lot more difficult to tell what the producers were going for when they made it. And frankly, I don't know what that tea would taste like. I'm sure it would be interesting as well. Yeah, rare to have the treat of something like this. And here we go, steep number 5. Take a smell. Sort of a faded, smoky fruit element to this now. Almost smells like a Shaguan production. It almost smells a bit more like Shaguan than the Shaguan Love Forever does, which is interesting. Just a little sour. I wonder if some of the sourness comes from just the quite dry storage. It'd be interesting to see what would happen with this cake after you store it in sort of a Pu'erh situation or somewhere where the tea is going to sort of reach an equilibrium humidity fairly quickly. So to see what the short-term conditioning would do to this tea. If you look at the leaves look pretty green. They're not even super dark green. They're dark-ish green, but they're so that can really tell you something about the storage of the tea. And one thing I have noted in these things is getting the Pu'erh here, but it has a really nice mouth coating, really nice lingering taste. You don't have to search very hard to find that. For some of these teas like the Love Forever, you really got to wait it out sometimes because it can be so punchy and it's sort of like waves of astringency can hit you depending on how the tea was brewed. For this tea, it's astringent, but that sweetness really comes very, very quickly to the throat and the back of the mouth. Floral, really quite strong. So yeah, definitely a really interesting tea. I am going to give this tea currently right now for my enjoyability a 6.3, which puts it at something that it definitely has some special something, some positive attribute that stands out and impresses. I think a couple things would stop me from drinking this tea, most of which has to do with just my personal preference. It's just very green, and it feels still quite raw to me. And those just tend not to be the teas that I drink all the time. For me, something like the Zhongcha Huang Yin, the 2001 tea, definitely fits closer to what I imagine as a daily drinker. Not to cast shade on the quality of either teas, I think this tea will probably be the better tea in the long run, and I think is a much more interesting tea. But if you just put me down to sort of a speed test or how much I actually want to drink these teas, I think I think I like that tea a lot. So definitely check out Teas We Like. I think I appreciate just sort of the selection they have. I think they put a lot of thought into it. It's sort of a co-production for 3 or 4 people, and I know that they put an effort to taste these teas and select them. So definitely recommend checking them out and checking out some of the teas they have there, even though this is sold out. So thank you all for tuning in, and I will see you all next time. Cheers. Before I finish the video, I just wanted to, I drank the rest of the tea over the course of yesterday, and I just had a few more thoughts coming back to the video. So I wanted to just say real quickly that the tea, while it's atypical of Yiwu, I find it pretty believable that the tea is Yiwu. I think in the aftertaste in particular, it sort of grips me in a way that does remind me of a lot of other Yiwu teas that I've had. And the other thing was that as I drank more and more, I really noticed sort of the energy of the tea just sitting in my core. And I think the chachi is definitely something that is worth mentioning for the tea. Just really very comfortable and warming. It's not an energy that made me feel uncomfortable or that I needed to get out of my chair and just do stuff. So just those are 2 aspects that I feel like I didn't cover quite enough in the earlier part of this video that really started to strike me later in the day, as sometimes happens. So thank you again for listening, and see you all next time. Cheers.